Okay, this is Chapter 5 of the IRC. This is not Chapter 5 in your building code book, so be careful, or your textbook. It is out of the IRC, and it relates to building codes as they pertain to floors. So be aware of that. This is the code section of this. Okay? These are some of the topics covered in the code book for floor framing. Of course, we're not going to cover it all. We're just going to cover what we're going to do for the most popular type of floor system out there, which is a wood frame floor. One thing I want to highlight is there is a grade mark on any piece of wood. That grade mark looks something like this here. These little stamps that you see. What that does is it tells us that wood's suitable to build with a structural element of a home. So, if you see that grade mark, that means you're good to go to use that piece for the structural element of a floor. Without that grade mark, you're not supposed to use that wood for the floor or any structural element in a home. That just says that's an approved board for that purpose. I'm going to go right to this picture. What I want to show you is framing of braced walls. And what a braced wall is, it means that a wall is supported at the top and at the bottom. So our walls have to be what we call braced. And we do that either through a couple of methods of making sure that we have something solid to nail into on the top and the bottom. Now, sometimes that does take a little work, and you have to go back in your floor system after it's built and add in a couple of blocks here or there, or maybe even a floor joist, depending on what you're trying to achieve. But as long as you have solid framing at the bottom and the top, you have a braced wall. And that's what we're supposed to have, is braced walls. Joists under parallel bearing partitions shall be of adequate size to support the load. Lumber of not less than 2 inches in nominal thickness, space not more than 4 feet. That is exactly what we're saying right here. When we reference the braced wall line. It's just saying that if the wall of the partition is parallel, joists under it shall support the load. Okay. Now, we have a lot of things we have to understand when we do framed openings. And this is a lot of text on the screen, and I'm trying to make sense of it real fast for you. And what we're looking at is anytime we have a framed opening, in this case you can see a framed opening right here. We have a couple rules we've got to highlight, and those rules are right here, but again, we're going to use this picture to highlight these rules. And what it says is header doubled if more than 4 feet. So if you look at this picture right here, this header gets doubled if it's more than 4 feet in span. Okay. So that is this rule right, oops. That is this rule right here. When the header joist does not exceed 4 feet, the header joist may be a single member. So again, anytime it spans greater than 4 feet, it has to be doubled. This rule right here highlights when the header joist span exceeds 4 feet, the trimmer joist and header joist shall be doubled. So we also have to double the trimmer joists. What are the trimmer joists? Well, let's take a look at this picture. You can see the trimmer joist is this right here, which also gets doubled. And you could look at this picture right here, you can see that they're doubled. And this is also on this side is trimmer joists. And certainly not last, but what it says next is approved hangers, right here. Shall be used for header joist to trimmer joist connection when the header joist exceeds 6 feet. So let's take a look at the picture and let's make sense of that. Okay, 6 feet, and where is the location of these joist hangers? Use hanger if header spans more than 6 feet. So you got to use a joist hanger in that location. For you guys that never seen a joist hanger, let me highlight that for you. So what you see here on this page are joist hangers, and this is a good illustration of this joist hanger. You can see that it's used to connect a joist to, well, sometimes to another joist or to a header. But nonetheless, this is a joist hanger, right? Well, these are all joist hangers, but here is just one by itself. Okay. So as I stated, the codes and the different things are all highlighted here. And if you look at this picture, it does help you make sense of it a little bit better. If you just take a look at it, what it says in these rules, and it points, the little arrows point exactly what they're talking about. 1, 2, 3. And you can relate that back to these codes that are clearly on the slide, this slide before, but the and they're here, right here. 1, 2, and 3. So I know the first time you take a look at these, it may be a little confusing to understand, but they're certainly important because you want to frame the opening of the right size. Truth be told, anytime I frame an opening, I double everything, even if it's a small opening. I've just gotten a habit over the years. But these are the codes, and they are as they relate to that picture. So please take a notice and review that real fast. All right, the ends of each joist, beam, or girder shall not be not less than 1.5 inches of bearing over wood or metal, and not less than 3 inches over masonry. So let me see if I can't clarify this. If you have a floor joist, I'm going to draw one right here. And I'll put a little band board out here just to make it realistic. And then I got a foundation wall that's right underneath it, right here. And that floor joist, this one right here, as long as the end of it is bearing, and that's right here, say right here, of not less than 1.5 inches on wood or metal, or 3 inches on masonry, then you're good to go. Okay, so wherever the ends of each floor joist are, you just got to make sure that it's bearing at least 1.5 inches or 3 inches on masonry. So normally under most operating conditions, that is the case on floor systems. But if not, what you have to do is use an approved joist hanger again. So if you're not able to meet that requirement, right there it is, approved joist hanger would be your alternative. All right. A lot of times in a floor system, what we have to do is overlap in the center because the floor system is bigger than what the wood is. So let's just take a quick look at that picture again. What you'll see is there's an overlap right here. In fact, all of them are overlapping. Okay, and it overlaps on that beam in the center. So that's what we're talking about, the overlap. And what we're saying is that has to be a minimum of 3 inches. right here. So when you have an overlap in the center, well, it doesn't always have to be center, but wherever that beam is, or anywhere that the floor joist is over a bearing support overlap each other, we got to have a minimum of 3 inches. Now, 3 inches is the minimum. I usually like to have it overlapping by 12 inches or more. But nonetheless, 3 inches is the minimum allowed. So be aware of that. Let's talk about bridging for a second, because that's what this slide is. What is bridging? One second. Here we have several pictures that highlight what bridging is. There are different types of bridging out there, but nonetheless, this is what it looks like. And we'll just use this as the examples. It is made to hold one floor joist to the next together. Let's see if I can draw it. So if I have a floor joist and I have another floor joist here, and to secure these two together, I can bridge them together. And it could be an X like this, that could be wood or metal, or it can be a solid piece of wood actually too. Solid piece of wood. But that's what's called bridging. We only are required to do that on 2x12s, bridge them. As you can see, it says 2x12s because what we're trying to do is keep them laterally supported to keep them from rolling against each other. But a lot of times we bridge things, even though they're 2x10s or something, we still bridge them is what I'm trying to say. But normally 2x12s is where the code requires. All right. At intervals not exceeding 8 feet. So if you take a look at this code right here, not exceeding 8 feet. So if we were to bridge something, and this picture helps us explain this a lot, you can see a bridging member is right here. So if this is not to exceed 8 feet between, that means I know the distance from here to here is likely not greater than 16 feet because you're only going to bridge 8 feet of that space. So making sure that this right here, this bridge, is in the center at 8 feet or less. So not spanning more than 8 feet without a bridge is the key, okay? I actually, in my world, I actually do 6 feet. Doesn't hurt to be a little bit more restrictive, but nonetheless, 8 feet is the rule. We are going to use, when we do our class shop example, we will do some bridging in there. So be prepared for that because I will demonstrate that also. Okay. Here's an interesting topic, and it's on notching and drilling holes in wood. So this is the codes. This is a lot of reading here. What I'm going to recommend you do is just pay attention to this right here. This highlights everything you need to know. And we're going to go take a quick look at this, but this is drilling and notching of floor joists. A very important subject. You don't want to get it wrong because you don't want to damage a floor joist. So the first thing I want to show you is the middle third. Does not get any notches. You're not allowed to notch in there. So where do the notches go? They go on the outside thirds. Out here. You're allowed to notch here and here. Okay. So the middle third for notches is off limits. Notches only. You're allowed to drill holes there. The other thing is I want to show you on this picture is what size can this notch be. And if you look, it's D divided by 3 and D divided by 6. So let's just say this was a 2x10. A 2x10 is typically 9 1/4 tall. 9.25 divided by 3 and 9.25 divided by 6. Now, I warned you in a quiz I might have you do that math. I would tell you, hey, I got a 2 by 10. What is the maximum depth and what's the maximum width of a notch that I can have? And if you take a look at this little notch here, it tells you. It tells you, and it shows right here the depth, that this is depth. D is depth. So that's the 9 1/4, and you divide it by 3 and you divide it by 6, and it gives you the size of the notch that you're allowed to make. Now, naturally speaking, a 2 by 10 or 2 by 12 would be bigger. That would be 11.25. So divided by 3 and divided by 6 would give you the size for that. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. It's pretty straightforward, but make sure you understand that because it's important to understand. The only difference is if it's an end notch, it does change a little bit. So an end notch means it's on the very end of the board, and it's D divided by 4 in this case. Okay. All right, let's take a look at holes. This is holes. The first thing I want to highlight is a hole cannot be closer to the edge by 2 inches. So you have a space of 2 inches on the top here and the bottom here where you're not allowed to place a hole. So 2 inches is that spot. The other thing is, what size is that hole? It's D divided by 3. So again, if this is a 9.25, so suppose it's a 2 by 10. A 2 by 10 is 9 1/4 tall because it's 1.5 inches by 9 1/4 because that's the actual size of a 2 by 10. If you were to purchase a 2 by 10, that would be the size of it. Divide by 3. And you get 3.08 something. That would be the maximum size. So basically 3 inches is the case, but nonetheless it's D divided by 3. So that is the maximum size hole you're allowed to drill. Again, as long as it doesn't become within 2 inches of the top and bottom. Hopefully this all makes sense. Take your time, take a second to review this. And I'm going to throw a couple questions on a test about this. I'm going to ask you, I have a 2 by 12. It's 11 1/4 high. What's the maximum size notch am I allowed? And you're going to have to do the math. You're going to have to say D divided by 6, D divided by 3, and you're going to have to solve it. Or I may ask you what the maximum size hole is for drilling, and you have to use D divided by 3. So again, 2 by 8s are 7 1/4 tall, 2 by 10s are 9 1/4 tall, 2 by 12s are 11 1/4 tall, the actual thickness. So if you have any questions, let me know. Okay, so I do want to highlight the fact that engineered products are not the same thing as wood eye joists, or as wood joists. So engineered products are different, so the drilling and notching of those are not going to follow these. So this is only for conventional lumber, regular dimensional lumber that they have stock at shelves. If you go something engineered, let me pull a picture of that. If you go with something engineered like this, these are engineered wood joists. You can see these are not regular wood. The drilling and notching procedures are up to the manufacturer. So consult your manufacturer's recommendations and specifications for drilling and notching these. Do not make the mistake of drilling and notching these per the regular code rules. Follow your manufacturer's specifications on these. Where they tell you can drill and notch in the sizing, it's up to them. Okay? Okay, this chart right here just tells you the thickness of your sheathing, aka your subfloor. So what it's telling you is, and most of the time we run things perpendicular today, right here. Back in the day, maybe 40, 50 years ago, a lot of guys did it diagonal. I'm not even sure why they did it diagonal, but we don't do that normally today. But if we know we're going to go 16-inch on centers, like right here, then that's going to be 5/8 if we're going perpendicular. That's the minimum thickness of the floor system. So you can see there's all kind of different listings. Now 16-inch on center is definitely going to be your go-to one. That's what majority of the houses are built, are 16-inch on centers. But as you can clearly see, you're allowed to do others if you really beef up your floor system. Like right down here. You can go up to 60 inches if you use 1.5 tongue and groove. T&G stands for tongue and groove. And tongue and groove just means you have a tongue in a groove that the next panel fits in that locks it together. So tongue and groove. So just as long as you have that tongue and groove, you can go all the way up to 60 inches on center spacing of your beams if it's 1.5 thick. Okay, last slide here. End joints in lumber used on soluble flooring shall occur over supports unless end match is used. So basically what it's saying is that if you're using whatever you're using for subfloor, the pieces have to end over, end joints have to end over joists. And you got to stagger step your joists, your end joints. Sorry, I'm getting a little tongue-tied here, but take a minute to read this slide and familiarize yourself with this. But end joints shall end over joists. Okay. I think that's all I need to cover. Make sure you review this again. This is the codes as they relate to floor systems in this chapter that can be found in the IRC. As you notice as you go through here, I do have some things underlined, like here. You can see the grade mark is underlined. Those are underlined. Those are underlined. So that may be of particular interest for test time, but make sure you double read those. I'm not trying to give anything away here, but make sure you read the underlined stuff twice. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Have a nice day.